All right, and it looks like we are live. Welcome all to this installment of the NAF Research and Tech Talk series. If you don't know me, my name is Nick Minar. I'm the Director of Research and Reporting at NAF, and I'll be your host today on today's Research and Tech Talk. Before we bring out our esteemed guest, I have just a couple brief announcements to share. So first, let me just say that registration for our annual conference, the NAF Next Conference, is now open. The conference will again be virtual this year as it was last year, and it's going to be taking place July 13th to the 15th. So you can join us online for an exhilarating, dynamic professional development conference with engaging main stage presentations, networking opportunities, and learning sessions, and much more. The theme of this year's conference is going to be Drive, which is reflective of all that our network has been through during this last challenging year, and how we're ready to all get back in the driver's seat and move forward into a brighter future. So with plenty of support and tools to share, we're excited that this year's conference is going to be bigger and brighter, particularly in service for our students that we're serving. So if you haven't done so already, you can register for the NAF Next Conference by visiting naf.org, and you'll just be greeted with a little pop-up window that has asked if you've registered for the conference, so be sure to check that out. I also just wanted to quickly say thank you to those of you that are going to be joining us live for this talk right now. Don't be afraid to ask questions or make comments in the chat. We do love audience participation during these research and tech talks, so if you have a burning question or a comment, kind of bubbling up throughout the course of the talk, just drop it in the chat, and we're going to do our best to address it, and then also get our expert opinion from our esteemed guest. That being said, if you're joining us live now and you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, just go ahead and do that. Let us know who you are, where you're joining us from today, what school or organization you're with. We like to create, a small learning community throughout these kinds of chats, so don't be shy to drop that in the comment section. Lastly, just a quick reminder, these conversations are recorded and posted to social media after the event. So we will post this particular talk to NAF's YouTube channel, NAF's Educator Facebook page, and then also the NAF Research and Tech LinkedIn page. So if you haven't done so already, please visit our NAF Educator Facebook page, as well as the NAF Research and Tech LinkedIn page, and give us a follow on each of those, just so you could be regularly updated with new news and announcements for future talks and things like that. Our guest today is a longtime friend of NAF and one that I've had the pleasure of getting to know during my almost 3 years at NAF now, and that's Dr. Eddie Fletcher. As a little aside, I would say Eddie's probably been on more academy visits than even I have at this point, but that's part of the reason how we initially connected. We were on academy visits together. So I'm happy to have him on today. Dr. Fletcher is in the College of Education and Human Ecology, a distinguished associate professor in the Workforce Development and Education program at The Ohio State University. Dr. Fletcher is also a senior faculty fellow in the Center on Education and Training for Employment. He's also a co-editor for the Journal of Career and Technical Education and an associate editor for the Career and Technical Education Research Journal. Dr. Fletcher is also a former high school business and marketing teacher and began his faculty career at Illinois State University for 1 year, and then he moved to the University of South Florida for 9 years. He joined the faculty at The Ohio State University 2 years ago. Dr. Fletcher has published on topics related to students' experiences in high school and is a particular focus of today's talk with NAF Academies. His research agenda focuses on the role and impact of career and technical education contexts on students' schooling experiences and outcomes, and he has a particular interest on ethnically and racially diverse students who come from traditionally underserved communities. Dr. Fletcher's research agenda has garnered over $4 million in federal funding from the National Science Foundation, and he's currently the principal investigator on an NSF I-Test grant titled the IT College and Careers Readiness Project, Career Academy Research on Educational Experiences and Related Successes. Dr. Fletcher is also the PI on an NSF EHR Core Research Grant titled Facilitating Pathways to Success for High Achieving Pre-Collegiate African American Males in STEM. So I'm really happy to have the chance to sit down with Dr. Eddie Fletcher. And without further ado, I'm just going to bring him right out so you all can meet him as well. And remember, don't be afraid to introduce yourself in the chat just so we know who's attending the talk today. Like I said, we want to make this a small learning community. So let me bring out Eddie. Eddie, it's good to see you today.
Likewise, and thank you, Nick, for the invite and the nice introduction. I appreciate it.
No, we appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I thought I would start our conversation just by letting the audience get to know you a little better. As I mentioned in your introduction, you're a longtime friend of NAF. You've been consulting and acting as a researcher and a thought partner for how many years is it now? How long has it been?
It's been about 9 years, I think.
9 years? Okay.
Yeah, the time goes by fast, yes.
It was, you originally were connected with us, right? Because you met, unfortunately, a late colleague of ours, Patty Smith, at, what was it, AERA or some conference?
Yeah, it was at AERA. I was actually presenting with my doctoral student. We were doing a collaborative research project looking at African-American students' experiences in academies. So, yeah, Patty came up to me and introduced herself, and that's where the relationship and the collaboration started.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, we're happy for the continued collaboration and thought partnership, and you know, we can't be more happy that you continue to be serving, you know, some of our NAF students on academy reviews and with your research, which is going to be the focus of our chat today.
Yeah, I mean, it helps me in my learning, and it helps me, you know, be more connected to the schools and what's going on, you know, on the ground.
Okay, great. I'd like for our audience and any educators that may be watching just to get to know you a little bit better. So as I mentioned in your bio just before bringing you out, you actually started your career in the classroom as a business and marketing teacher. Can you just, you know, tell us what made you want to pursue a PhD, and particularly with a focus on education research?
Yes, that is correct. And actually, it was my time as a business and marketing teacher that led to my interest in pursuing graduate school. So after I earned my bachelor's degree, taught for a year, then I wanted to go back and earn my master's. So once I was in my master's program, that really led to my interest in earning a doctorate. And just to give you some context, when I was teaching high school, this was during the time of the No Child Left Behind legislation. So one of the major provisions of that legislation was that emphasis on testing students. So many schools had standardized assessments that students needed to pass in order to graduate from high school. So in other words, there's high stakes attached to those assessments. So that also contributed in the context of my local school to an increased focus on the core academic areas, math, science, English, for example. So I remember when I was teaching, the school and district administrators would do classroom visits, observations, and they only seemed to visit those classrooms in the core academic areas. I also, you know, when I was engaged in teacher professional development days, the district administrators only seemed to kind of plan for the core academic areas, and all the other areas were kind of left to do whatever they wanted. So there just wasn't a huge focus on career and technical education or any of the areas outside of the core academics. So I felt a little bit left out, and I felt like career and technical education really provided value and benefits for students. So that's really what compelled me to go back to school, and led to a burning question of mine, which was, what is the value and benefit of participating in career and technical education, both in school outcomes and out of school? So I wanted to first see what the literature says about, you know, what research has been conducted on that area, and then that led to me wanting to conduct my own studies on that topic.
Right. Because yeah, a lot more. There's much more in school than just those kind of core,
Yeah.
and this is a common criticism of the No Child Left Behind legislation, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot more than just kind of those core subjects. And your research has very much looked into that, with student experiences and feelings of, security, safety, that can't be really captured by numbers like that
Right.
in some of the standardized tests. So yeah, I can definitely see how that spawned you or
Hmm.
had you grow towards being more interested in those kinds of things for sure.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you, you've been a PhD, a
Hmm.
professor for a number of years
Hmm.
now. As you've grown as a professor, how has your research evolved with you? What types of
Hmm.
questions did you start out investigating, and what interests you now?
Well, this is probably very rare in the academy and with doctoral students going into faculty roles. But surprisingly, my research agenda has stayed fairly consistent from the time I started my doctoral
Okay.
program. Again, from that burning question. So I came into my doctoral studies with, again, that burning question that I alluded to earlier, which was essentially how do career and technical education students fare compared to um, other students, whether they're college preparatory students, whether the students that take the minimum credits to graduate from high school, which we oftentimes term as the general track, or those dual track students. Those are the students who take both career and technical education and college prep. So that's what I really started studying. So I examined post-secondary education and labor market outcomes for my dissertation research project. And I used the 1997 National Longitudinal Survey of Youth dataset to longitudinally track students who graduated from high school in 1997, and I followed them to 2006 in terms of, again, labor market outcomes and post-secondary outcomes. And that really kind of evolved into my current research agenda, which focuses more on high quality career and technical education school reform efforts, such as high school career academies. Um, so I'm not only interested in in those long-term outcomes after students graduate, but also like I said, the in-school outcomes like affective, behavioral, emotional factors that you know they are challenged with in school. So in other words, I'm interested in studying the student experience, as you know alluded to earlier, of academy students in depth. So looking at qualitative components, interviewing them, finding out their experience, but also using quantitative methods to compare them statistically and find out, are they different? Do they have different outcomes compared to non-academy students?
Hmm. And then the hope is you'll be able to make recommendations and kind of point to best practices, right, that practitioners, educators can adopt that is research supported. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We put a lot of time and energy and money and a lot of willpower into doing these school reform efforts like high school career academies, and we always wonder, well, what's the payoff? This does it really translate into real student outcomes? Do students really fare better in the academy model than they would in a traditional model? Is it worth all the effort that we put into it?
Hmm. And that, yeah, for we're all hoping it does. So we have some good resources to
Right.
serve our students.
Yeah.
Let's actually dive in a little bit to some of
Mhm.
your research interests on, particularly on the student engagement and student
Mhm.
experience pieces. Now, a great deal of your research that I'd like to spend some time discussing here is particularly, as you mentioned, focus on the student experience, right?
Mhm.
So, how are students going through their high school career? What impact is it having on them? Can you set the stage for our audience a little bit and just tell us what is student engagement and
Mhm.
really why is it important to study?
Mhm. So I use the high school survey of student engagement, which is an instrument that looks at more constructs than just student engagement, but student engagement is obviously the main one. And student engagement is a multifaceted construct, which has been really studied for the last, I believe, 5 decades. A common definition for that construct is it's really the psychological investment and effort that students put toward schooling in general. It's also looking at their active involvement and participation and learning. as well as their feelings of connectedness to the school. So most researchers that have looked at student engagement constructs, they found that it's made up of 3 domains. Now there are other studies that say there are 4 or 5, but generally it's agreed that there's 3 domains. The first domain is behavioral engagement, which is essentially students' engagement in the life of school. So this generally is captured in their co-curricular as well as extracurricular activities like athletics, their involvement in clubs and student organizations like FBLA or BPA for if they're in business, for instance, as well as the work that they do, maybe full-time or part-time or things like that outside of school. The second domain is cognitive engagement, which is a student's investment in learning. That's the kind of the effort that they put into learning, their investment in learning. It includes their perceptions of their capabilities, their desires, their, again, investment in learning, and their determination to learn. And then the third domain is emotional engagement, which is students' perceptions and attitudes toward their schooling overall, or their school overall. So it includes the extent to where they feel like they have a sense of belonging in school, their identification with their school. Also includes their sense of safety and whether they can really be themselves in school. So and be accepted for being who they are. So that's really student engagement in a nutshell.
Okay. And yeah, I can imagine if a student feels, engaged, safe, able to be their kind of natural self in school,
Mm-hmm.
the learning will be much more effective, right?
Absolutely.
Is that what the research is pointing to?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And so another question for you is why study student engagement within a CTE framework?
Mm-hmm.
Why not just your typical high school? Why choose the CTE framework?
So there has been some prior studies that really demonstrated that students who participate in career and technical education are more likely to graduate on time. So career and technical education programs are kind of thought of as a kind of safety mechanism or a dropout prevention strategy for students. And we know that student engagement is also a predictor of on-time graduation or persistence in high school. So my major hypothesis and reasoning for doing this is that my student engagement studies look at who participates in NAF academies and and the benefits of that. So when you think about the NAF Academy model, there's several components, several tenets or features that I would think align well with staying engaged and persisting in school. Small learning communities is one big one where students are cohorted, so they have this common bond. They have friendships that they can cultivate from 9th grade to 12th grade, not just with their peers, but also with their teachers as well. They have usually the same teachers throughout their 4 years in high school. You also have a set of students who have a shared interest in a career theme. So they have that kind of natural bond as well. And then also findings from my qualitative studies that I've conducted really emphasize that students believe that they had strong connections with their schools, their teachers and peers. And again, mainly due to that cohort model. A lot of the students describe their peers and their academy as a family. So given that, I anticipated that students who would have higher student engagement, particularly in the domain of emotional engagement, um, would be NAF students or, academy students. And my research does show promise that the NAF Academy model, when the school has a high fidelity to the NAF Academy model, meaning that they're really implementing the practices that are kind of prescribed to them at a high level, that it really does enhance the students' emotional engagement. So, just to kind of recap, emotional engagement again is, students' sense of belonging, connectedness to school, their sense of safety, feelings that they can be accepted and be um, they can be accepted and for who they are in school. So I really think that tells the story, the promise of the Academy model as a really effective high school reform initiative.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I love hearing the research behind it because I'm sure you've experienced this when you visited an academy on a quality visit. They say, we always ask the students, do you feel connected to your fellow peers, to your teachers? And they always say, oh, Mrs. X is like my second mother, right? Or Mr. Y is like my second father.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that really comes through during some of those academy visits, and
Definitely.
it's really great to hear that has positive effects on the students,
And
really in terms of their engagement. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, and I really like doing those academy review visits because not only does it give me a sense of what's happening on the ground, but it also gives me ideas for research as well. And you know, when I am thinking about selecting sites and things like that, I can use a lot of the rubrics and things that we're creating through the academy review visit in the research as well. So.
Gotcha. So we've heard a little bit about why student engagement is important,
Mhm.
but a lot of your research focuses particularly on Black African American students in particular.
Mhm.
Can you give us some context on why student engagement might be particularly important for that group of students?
Yeah, so in K through 12 schools, there remains lingering, racial inequities, and I think that's really come to the forefront with COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the issues with police brutality. Um, so not only are there these racial inequities, but there's also these opportunity gaps, particularly for Black youth compared to like white students. So racial inequities can be found all over the place, and when you think about an educational context, some of the research examines cultural mismatching, which is when teachers cultures don't align or connect with their students. School funding issues. When you look at the pool of qualified teachers, segregation of schools, and also access to a high quality and rigorous curriculum that prepares students to be both college and career ready. And it's not just Black students. In particular, it's Black male students. They continue to be one of the most academically and socially marginalized students in K through 12 schools across the country. Black male students are more likely than any other subgroup to come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, be undereducated, have higher unemployment, they're over incarcerated, have negative health conditions, and have the lowest life expectancy. And even further, less than half of Black male students graduate from high school within a 4-year duration. So these issues have really been persisting for years, for decades, without any profound solutions. And researchers, again, have been trying to figure out how to best engage Black students, and particularly Black male students in the academic environment. That's really the context as to why the focus on Black students.
Right. And what has your research found? If we have educators, NAF educators, practitioners watching the stream or watching the video
Mhm.
afterwards, what kind of findings can you share with them to try to particularly hone in on young Black males or
Mhm.
Black students in general to try to boost student engagement?
So one of our research study sites, again, was a NAF Academy. It had 98% student population, 98% Black student population, and 100% of the students in that particular school qualified for free and or reduced lunch. And we found that the school made tremendous efforts at providing what we call wraparound services, really to demonstrate care for their students, their families, and their communities. This particular academy that I'm highlighting had what they called a spot clinic. In that spot clinic, they had a pediatrician, they had a school psychologist, social worker, that provided students with, free healthcare, eye care, dental care. They provided clothing for students, clothing for students. They provided meals for students 6 of the 7 days of the week. And in addition to providing services for the students, they also provided family services. So they provided GED classes and various trade and industry courses for their families. So based on a combination of perspectives from school personnel, school stakeholders, and when I examined the results from the high school survey of student engagement, we found that the wraparound services provided equitable supports for economically disadvantaged students. And this was really instituted by what we call a healing-centered mindset, and enabled the school personnel and stakeholders to really adopt a no-excuse attitude. So when there was a problem, they didn't see it as a problem. They just immediately went to a solution. Absolutely. Yeah. So they don't have problems in their school, and that's the mindset that they had. So if there's an issue with students not being able to be transported somewhere, they will solve that problem. So even further, we found that in comparison to students at a large comprehensive high school, the academy students had statistically significant higher scores on behavioral engagement and cognitive engagement. We were a bit surprised that there was no statistically significant difference in emotional engagement. But we kind of concluded that it is quite plausible that the wraparound services provided for the students and the families, as well as I think the caring culture of their school personnel, in conjunction with the NAF model and the components of NAF, really contributed to significantly higher scores on behavioral and cognitive engagement. But that is a limitation of our study, that we cannot say with certainty which factors and pinpoint which factors contributed to the high engagement. So that's why we need to continue our studies and to include more schools and try to help our generalizability of findings to the broader Black student population. And then another, I think, component that we found too that was pretty consistent across the schools in our past studies is this school size. And there's been some research. It's a little bit mixed, but for the most part, school size is generally a factor in terms of producing those higher levels of engagement for students. So we found that smaller schools generally have students who are higher, more engaged than students in large comprehensive schools, for instance, and particularly with the emotional engagement of students.
Gotcha. Is there kind of a sweet spot in terms of the student body size? Is it over 1,000, under 1,000? Like what's the research saying?
Yeah, I think the research says generally around 700 students or less. But I don't know. I know there's been some studies on that, but I don't know how many studies have been done looking at what's this kind of the sweet spot in terms of size.
I can imagine too, with some of those wraparound services you mentioned, school is not just a place where students would go for 8-9 hours a day. It's really a center of the community, right? Which I imagine you'll get, if there were such a thing as measuring community engagement in school, that would only heighten that as well and kind of reinforce that student engagement. Has that at all been from what you've found at all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So when we think about student engagement in the U.S. and this country, is there anything that's kind of a pressing concern for you that you've noticed? And in particular, I'm sure this has been impacted dramatically by COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. What are your thoughts on what that's done for a school that maybe offers wraparound services? Has it really heightened the importance of that, or can you give us any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think the current and past school reform efforts have tended to focus on core academic subjects only, with the thought that requiring more credits in the core academic areas will result in students who are more prepared to transition from high school to college. And I think this contributes to the dropout rate of students who are really bored with the traditional education system that they believe really lacks meaning and relevancy to their lives and their individual interests. I think that's where career and technical education programs and career academies really contribute to the effectiveness of schools related to student engagement, because often students in those environments, in those programs, do find meaning and relevancy in what they're learning. And this is aligned with what they want to do in terms of their career interests. So I think, and that, the COVID-19 has really heightened and exacerbated that problem, as some students essentially have kind of checked out and are, really less engaged than they were when they were in person. We've also talked to students in our current project about, the impact of COVID-19 as well as school personnel. And they shared with us that their students, or they themselves, as students themselves, did not participate in internships, many of them, as they had planned during the last summer and this upcoming summer, which is really unfortunate, because we know that internships is generally one of the most valuable and memorable learning experience for students in the academies. So yeah, I think COVID-19 has a
definitely.
big impact.
Yeah, we've noticed that too, just in working with the districts and schools ourselves, is that those in-person internships have been severely affected. Many of our academies have pivoted to virtual internships, but it's still very challenging to serve the same number of students that way, especially when you take into consideration some students may not be connected virtually, as you mentioned, the same way they are in person, for sure. I'd like to move to a different topic you've done a lot of research on, and that's Black African American students in STEM. Particularly, you're doing some research right now about Black African American males in STEM, which we know is an underrepresented group in the STEM community and STEM careers. And this is a topic you've been doing a lot of research on. It's particularly too with NAF academies. Can you tell our audience, why this topic is important and why does it need to be studied?
So we know from the research that there is a shortage of Black students enrolling in STEM courses, particularly at the higher ed level, as well as in STEM fields in general and careers. So currently only 9%, only 9% of Blacks are employed in STEM fields. Also in 2017 to 2018 academic year, Black students earned only 7% of baccalaureate degrees in STEM.
Wow.
So for our country to remain internationally competitive, we really must have full participation of all ethnically and racially diverse groups. So I think that's really why there's been a call from the National Science Foundation and federal organizations for efforts and research that will help us to understand this problem and ways to broaden participation in STEM. And I think
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think career and technical education is really at the forefront of this, kind of establishing those pipelines early, sometimes even as early as middle school through high school, to get those students interested, ensure that they're taking the prerequisite courses so that when they do go to college and they want to major in it, they're prepared and ready for the rigor of those challenging courses.
Right, it's not some insurmountable mountain, off in the distance. It's something they have experience in, work-based learning experience or internships, and yeah, it's much more manageable and approachable, right, than something
absolutely
they've never seen before. Are there any recurring themes or best practices you're noticing throughout your research when it comes to promoting Black African American students towards STEM careers?
Yeah, I think that recruiting Black school stakeholders and advisory board members is critical. So I think Black students need to see people who share their identities as role models to know that they too can succeed in their chosen career fields. So that's kind of what we're seeing, is this whole concept of cultural matching really helps. So if I'm a Black male and if I'm in a school that may be primarily Black, student population, but I don't see any Black males in leadership positions. If I don't see anyone on the advisory board get to interact with people who are in STEM careers that look like me, then sometimes it doesn't seem like that's a space for me. So I think that is what we're finding so far. And our current project is looking at Black male students in STEM, and it's we're funded last August, so it's still evolving. But that's kind of some of the things that we're finding. We also have found so far that even within a predominantly Black school with Black school stakeholders, they tend to not have a lot of programs specifically geared toward Black male students. And when we were interviewing a lot of the stakeholders, they said, yeah, like, wow, we never even thought about this. Like, we do need this programming specifically targeted to our Black male students. So I recommend having programs like that for Black male students so they can be mentored by other Black male role models, and offer them spaces to discuss pertinent issues that are relevant, and concerns that they have that are relevant to Black males particularly.
Yeah, I see that as being particularly valuable too,
Hmm.
because even if, um, if some of those students may be the first in their family to potentially want to go to college, and
Yep.
they just want to get information on what that experience is like for a young Black student going
Hmm.
into a STEM career, having someone to talk to about that and kind of the realistic challenges they will have to overcome, I
Hmm.
could see that being very useful, right? And kind of
Absolutely.
letting that student know that someone is looking out for them and can provide them insight and input.
Yeah.
Again, kind of making it more manageable, right?
Well, and we've looked at a school that had a large Black student population, but most of the teachers and administrators and school personnel were white, and we found that the Black females were doing very well. They were, applying to multiple colleges, getting in. They were participating in internships. They were motivated, and the Black males were a little bit disengaged. Whereas we looked at another school that's primarily Black student population, but they also have administrators and teachers and advisory boards that look like the student body. And we found, interestingly, that there weren't those gaps between or disparities between the males and females at that particular school. So that's just things that we're probing and trying to get a better understanding of.
Gotcha. Yeah, you had talked about this mismatch sometimes
Hmm.
between life experiences, between you know their high school community and essentially white corporate America, right?
Hmm.
And you've talked about the importance of having role models and someone who can kind of coach them through some of those experiences and prepare them for it. Um, um, for the folks within the NAF network, what else can we be doing to try to prepare some of those students for the encounters they may experience, after high school or once
Hmm.
they enter the workforce? Anything else that your research or others has shown?
Yeah, I believe the best way to do that is to provide Black students opportunities to see, again, what corporate America looks like. And this could be in the form of job shadowing, internships, also having alumni come back to the school and share their experiences in corporate America. That seems to be something that students really relate to. In my research, I have found that Black Academy students do experience microaggressions in their internships. So when you have internship facilitators who, again, are unfamiliar with the various identities of the interns, you are likely to encounter these issues. So to that, I would encourage school administrators to work with their internship facilitators and try and educate them on their particular student demographics and what they need to be successful. We found issues such as transportation and needing to provide lunch and food, during these internships. All these things we need to consider. Um, and then um, I think also kind of unpacking the experiences when students get in the school. So there might be some racialized experiences that need to be unpacked in the school with administrators, teachers, etc.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, those can be sometimes challenging topics to approach, but I know it's one our NAF educators and our academies are trying to tackle kind of straightforward.
Hmm.
Do you have any words of wisdom on how to kind of best go about that, or
Hmm.
what's the approach? Did you ever have to deal with that when you were a teacher or anything like that?
Um, yeah, I probably didn't have to deal with it a whole lot as a teacher, but I do notice I didn't know from the research that there were some ways that they did unpack that in schools.
Okay.
They, for instance, one of the schools, they went to a movie, uh,
Hmm.
The Hate You Give, I think is
Hmm.
the title of the movie. So they all went to see the movie, and then they were able to unpack that in school. And they talk about the mirrors, like what are some things in the movie that you really resonate with, like, that you feel like you have a shared life experience with, and they had different ways of processing that. But then it was action oriented at the end, like, what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? And they were surprised how the students really were like motivated. It's like, yeah, let's do something about this. We're ready to go. So I think doing things like that, those types of activities are very important for students. So you're acknowledging their life experiences, and giving them a healthy way to process discrimination that they're going to encounter in society.
Right, and it also makes it a much more kind of shared problem to tackle
Yes,
for that
absolutely.
group of students or that school, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's
Yeah,
something
it
that
becomes
kind
more
of
of a community building activity.
exactly, yeah, kind of something everyone's pushing in the same direction,
Right.
just to try to address that issue or create a culture around addressing that issue.
Absolutely.
That's really interesting. Um, uh, I'm glad your research illuminated that kind of just really simple activity, but
Hmm.
could stick with those students for many years to come.
Absolutely.
This this idea of some of the experiences that students will encounter once they enter corporate America or the workforce or life after high school
Hmm.
can really highlight the importance of some of the school and business partnerships that may provide work-based learning experiences, things like internships, job shadowing,
Hmm.
mock interviews, while students are still in high school. Um, and as you know, a real cornerstone of what we're trying to do at NAF is to bring those wonderful educators and the schools we work with to corporate partnerships and funders so that students can get those types of experiences.
Hmm.
I know you've done some research on kind of what works best when kind of bridging those two stakeholders.
Hmm.
Can you share with us some of those practices?
Yeah, we did find some of our results, particularly with our qualitative methods in terms of what works well with business school partnerships. We did find that having a dedicated leader to broker the relationship with business partners was really key. So we found that this requires that, to do it well, at least, that the leaders should have time to really forge and maintain those relationships. So time is really key. So it's important that this person or persons should not have other large commitments, such as
Right.
teaching, for instance, because they really need time to, devote to collab, building and managing these critical relationships.
Right.
So
So,
we've,
so it's not
yeah,
a side project, right? It's
correct.
it's it's their focus essentially.
That's their focus, absolutely. So
Okay.
the schools that really had really robust academy or advisory boards and partnerships were the ones that had a dedicated leader for that task. And we found it wasn't just the having the designated leader, but it was some characteristics about the leader that
Mhm.
resonated with the business leaders and the partners. When we were interviewing the advisory board members, we were asking them, well, why do you engage? And usually they're pointed to that leader. And it was about their characteristics. They needed someone who's able to communicate expectations and follow through with reminders. They said they have really, really busy schedules and they really don't have time to constantly check on the school to see what they need. And so they needed someone who was, very organized, who can communicate and follow through saying, hey, we need you here on this date. They really like that. So there's a lot about the characteristics of that particular leader that was important too.
Great. So that's yeah. I guess you always hear that, right? Like really driven people and really hardworking people can help drive some of that
Hmm.
change. But that's great that there's actually research behind it now in your experience about
Right.
bridging schools versus the workforce community.
Yeah.
It can really, it's not a side project. It should be
Yeah.
the focus of this position, kind of maintaining those relationships. So
Well,
that's
and
really great to hear.
it was
Yeah, go
interesting
ahead.
as well that one of the ones who we thought was really exemplary at forging these relationships. Everyone called her the linchpin. She's the linchpin.
Mhm.
She was the one who really brought everything together, and I just think that speaks volumes of the need for this person to be dedicated for that task, and for them to have certain qualities, I think, that resonate with the business leaders, that they feel like they trust them, that they want to do whatever they ask them to do.
Mhm. Right. Because, yeah, when we think about the school's
Mhm.
interaction with the community, that includes the business community, at least for most career and technical education academies,
Absolutely.
right? Because they're trying to expose students to that. So, yeah, that's not just supporting the community in terms of those wraparound services you
Hmm.
mentioned, but also supporting the community in outreach and coordination with local businesses so that students can get those work-based learning experiences. Um, when we think about that relationship, between schools and the business communities. You just mentioned, one of the linchpin, individuals who kind of helps with that, and that's kind of their focus. What should the business community? Do you have any thoughts on what the business community can be doing to kind of facilitate that relationship?
Um, yeah, I mean, we really found that the advisory boards that we talked to, at least, really were high participatory, and they were really interested in the schools that they worked with. They valued the school. They saw the school as a pinnacle in their community. One of them talked about it. It's the beacon of the community. So there's a lot of investment in the school. Uh, um, and again, a lot of the investment was due to the kind of the that linchpin, or that leader that brought them together. Also, many of the advisory board members had, again, strong affiliations with the schools they were involved in, and a lot of that was because they were alumni, so they graduated from the school, so they
Alumni
had,
friends.
really strong ties and connections. So we didn't see any problems really with advisory board members who just felt like it was a waste of their time, or they needed any extra support. They were really glad to lend their hands and do whatever the school needed them to do.
That's great. That's what we're looking for with the advisory
Hmm.
board, model. Those volunteers, those individuals to really help bridge that gap,
Right.
and get those students passionate and involved about a potential career path that they may enjoy or want to
Absolutely.
fulfill. Um, has there been anything in your research when you're looking at these relationships that surprised you? Something that worked well that maybe had unintentional consequences. Just anything
Mhm.
where you were like, "Huh, I'm surprised that happened," or "I'm surprised that
Yeah.
worked out the way it did."
I'm not necessarily very surprised, but I have been very impressed with many of the advisory board members that I've talked with. They really, again, hold the school and the students in very high regards. Um, they also have this problem-solving mentality and mindset.
Mhm.
So, just for example, one of the academies of engineering that, again, serves predominantly Black students noticed an issue with low ACT scores of their students, and the inability of their students to kind of get into these four-year universities and study engineering because of their low scores. So, they decided to work with their local university faculty members in engineering, who have a very strong, reputation, and they provided ACT tutoring sessions for their students. So I just believe that that's one example of the power of school business partnerships to solve problems and create that culture of success for students. Again, it was this mindset that, this kind of no excuse mindset, like, we're going to identify the problems, and then we're going to identify the solutions. And I think that's just speaks volumes of the value of having an advisory board
Hmm. Hmm.
that's engaged.
Yeah, it can be really hard to kind of pinpoint what exactly, to quite understand what a quality relationship like that looks like. But
Absolutely.
I, I imagine the advisory boards and those business partners also get a lot out of it as well. You know, they're mentoring, you know, potential future employees and kind of
Absolutely.
getting some experience doing that.
Yeah, and those students bring great ideas to their organization that they never even thought of, and many of them are very tech savvy and things like that. So it really is a mutually beneficial relationship, I believe, in most
Right.
cases.
Yeah, I'm already falling out of touch with today's youth, so I could benefit from more work-based learning interactions
Likewise,
myself.
likewise, I can't keep up.
When we think about the research in this space, you know, what do you see as kind of the most pressing need? Like, we know these types of relationships are important. We
Mhm.
know they potentially could have long-lasting effects, but you know, where do we need to do some serious work and kind of drill down a little bit when it comes to the pressing needs around some of the work?
Yeah, I've noticed a couple of studies, including mine, that examine this relationship and how it provides students with what we call social capital, which are really the
Mhm.
resources and opportunities that are afforded to students through these networks and relationships that are garnered through the advisory board. So from that standpoint, I think we need to know more about how the school business partnerships might contribute to this social capital, particularly for diverse students. We oftentimes think of white students having the social capital, but it's like, well, what about ethnically and racially diverse students? What kind of capital do they get, from these types of experiences and relationships? I also think we need to learn more about, again, best practices around both sustaining and maintaining an effective partnership and its roles and responsibilities, for the key stakeholders that are involved. One of the big issues, I believe, with school business partnerships is they often rely on just one person or maybe two instrumental people. And when they leave, it really can be difficult to sustain that momentum. So how do we keep this going for you know for years and years down the road, and not just put all of our eggs in one person's basket? When they leave, it goes away, and that's happens a lot, even with I'm sure with the academy model, when you have school personnel or administrators or teachers who are very instrumental in implementing those, the academy model. If they leave, then you're stuck with what happens to it. Does it continue, or does it just become a fad and go away?
Yeah, it's hard to replace those types of people that can be very
Absolutely.
effective and passionate about it. But the hope is, and I think some of your research is alluding to this, is that the Career Academy model and NAF in
Mhm.
particular kind of builds a culture around those kinds of attitudes and activities, so that it hopefully it's not just one person, right? It's
Absolutely.
kind of the whole leadership, up from the superintendent down to the classroom teacher, essentially.
Yeah, and we find the ones who really have the high fidelity, that are really implementing those practices. You can see some student outcomes that are higher than the other academies that have lower implementation, and that's something we're still working on, studying and teasing out to see, does the level, the fidelity, really impact student outcomes and results.
Yeah, we're hoping that can be, you know, at some point a national conversation too, because I know we've talked about this at length in the past, but
Mhm.
a lot of schools, particularly schools that may not be a NAF academy, can really only be CTE sometimes in name, right? And they
Right.
may not be implementing, you know, a whole spectrum of work-based learning or career themes. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it takes more than just calling yourself a CTE school, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've, been to academies where they don't have those partnerships built. They don't have the internships. They, just really have the classroom curricula, and that's it. There's no co-curricular or any type of outside, hands-on experiences that students receive. And, we just kind of scratch our head in terms of what kind of outcomes, I mean, did it really make a difference in students,
Right,
experiences?
right. Yeah, because at the end of the day, right, that's the goal, is it's going to
Absolutely.
positively impact those students.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's really what my research is really trying to uncover is, what do these students get out of it, and is it worth it?
Yeah, what is that return for the students in
Absolutely,
particular?
absolutely.
Well, I wanted to try to open it up for some questions from the audience, but some folks in the audience have been saying that they're having some technical
I
issues. So
noticed that. Uh,
likely we will just have to upload this recording
okay,
and make it
that'd be
available
great.
to everyone that RSVP'd
That'd be
afterwards.
great.
But if I could, just for a second, I'm going to take both of us off the screen and
Okay.
share that product we made from some of your research called a research zine, and just kind of go over it for the audience. So I'm going to disappear. They'll still be able to hear us in the recording, but we will not be shown on screen. So for those of you who may not have seen this before, as you know, Eddie is responsible for authoring numerous peer-reviewed papers, but those aren't always the most, easily accessible for our educators or our practitioners in the field. So some of the things we've started to experiment with Eddie is turning his research into more easily digestible kind of, shorter products. So this is a particular article he authored with two other authors listed here, Nathalie and Victor Hernandez Gantes. And the title of this paper was "The High School Academy as a Laboratory of Equity, Inclusion, and Safety." And what we did here is we tried to break down some of Eddie's research findings, some of their research findings, and do something much more digestible for our educators and our practitioners. So essentially, this graphical representation is going to convey to the reader, how do we ensure that the school experience is safe and inclusive for those students. So we kind of highlighted some of Eddie's research about offering, as he mentioned, an enticing theme, having things like open enrollment, limiting that school size. And we pulled out some wonderful quotes that Eddie, gathered during his focus groups, and really kind of highlight some of those best practices that a high fidelity NAF Academy was doing to promote this sense of safety and well-being amongst their students. I hope I was doing an okay job summarizing this research, Eddie. Is there anything you'd like to add about, just this project in general?
No, I think you did a very nice job. And again, this is the qualitative findings that we had in year
Mhm.
one of our project. And then we were able to corroborate that year two in terms of looking at emotional engagement. So those, sense of safety and sense of belonging that you're talking about really is emotional engagement. And we found that uh, students in this particular academy were significantly higher in their emotional engagement compared to students in a traditional comprehensive high school without an academy. So, it really felt like those two kind of spoke to each other, both the qualitative and the quantitative findings. And again, I think, we'll want to continue to do our research in more schools and make it more generalizable. But I'm thinking it seems that that's kind of the story again of the academy motto is this um, higher connection to the school that students get from being in an academy.
Right, right. We're just about at time, Eddie. I want to thank you very much for coming on today. I'm sorry we were having some streaming issues here, but we
That's
will
okay.
upload the video and make it available to everyone that had RSVP'd, as well as our just general NAF YouTube channel, our NAF Research and Tech LinkedIn, as well as our NAF Educator Facebook page. So I always ask our guests before we sign off, how can our audience keep up to date with the research you're doing? Do you post it to your website at OSU, or are you on Twitter or any social media? How can folks kind of keep up to date with what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm a little bit social media challenged. That's hopefully my next step is to do that. We're going to be creating a website um, for our current project, and it's going to include all the former projects, and in that we're going to include some of these findings that some of these kind of research practitioner friendly reports that you've produced, and then we'll have a list of all of our publications that come out of our grant project as well. So it'll be coming soon. Hopefully we can send it to the NAF listserv, and then maybe shift it and transition it to a social media account.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure our network, I mean, many of them know you just from the visits, and NAF
Mhm.
Next would be very interested in that. And
Absolutely.
as you have more research coming out, we're hoping to do more of those zines, those graphical
Yeah.
representations, so they can be widely shared to a more general audience as well. Is there anything you'd like to tell our audience about, what you have coming up next? What's on the horizon for you as you're in your future research?
Mhm. Yeah, right now we're working on a study. Again, we were funded, started last August, and it's focused on Black male students in STEM academies. So we've got 4 schools across the country that have high participation of Black students, greater than 50% population. And we're going to look at not only the student experience and the engagement, but we're going to do what we call household visits and interview the family members to find out what contributed to their success. We know the kind of the issues and challenges that Black males face. That's been well documented, but we don't necessarily know those counter narratives, or those students who beat the odds, who are resilient and go on to do well in these STEM academies. And that's what we're trying to document and trying to figure out with teachers as co-researchers. Will be interviewing the family members and finding out what contributed to their success, and then debriefing with the teachers to figure out how we can use the knowledge that we learned in those interviews to integrate into their curricula to make it more culturally responsive. So that's what I'm really excited about at this point in time, and that'll carry through another 3 years for the project.
Great. Well, we look
Yeah.
forward to hearing more about that
Yeah.
research and
Thank
making
you.
it available to those who are interested in it. Um, I'm gonna thank you one more time for
Thank
your
you very
time
much.
today, Eddie.
I
And
enjoyed it.
yeah, thank you. And we hope to see you soon, either at Academy
Yes,
visits or
absolutely.
perhaps another talk in the future. If you have more updates we'd like to share out.
Sure. Thank you.
Just a quick parting word for our audience. Again, sorry about the tech issues here. We will be uploading this video to various social media, and I'll also email it out to those of you that RSVP'd but weren't able to join us live. So thank you very much again, and thanks again to our guest Eddie, and we'll see you next time on NAF Research and Tech.